So, dear friends, indeed we're discussing the subject which is quite peculiar and quite often difficult for me to understand and to embrace. And I would like to ask our distinguished panelists the first questions as follows. It seems that everybody today condemns anti-Semitism. Everybody recognizes that Holocaust is the biggest tragedy in the history of mankind. In the meantime, we see increasingly biased and hostile policies towards the state of Israel and towards the Middle East problematic in general. Many prominent leaders, including in Europe, Angela Merkel, and first vice chair of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans, explicitly said that anti-Zionism and anti-Israelism is a modern form of anti-Semitism. Nevertheless, in the meantime, we see that this understanding and these statements are not reflected in practical politics. I'm not talking only about the UN. The UN is a very specific organization, is a big round table, and it is not a secret that majority of the UN member states are not democracies. Unfortunately, the same trends can be observed also in other organizations where there can be no doubts that these are made and formed by genuine democracies like the OSCE, Council of Europe, or the European Union. And my first question to our panelists is, you as experienced parliamentarians, as decision makers, how can you explain this discrepancy and this, I would say, a sort of political schizophrenia with regard to attitudes towards classic anti-Semitism and modern anti-Israelism? Please, Tamar, would you like to start?
Thank you very much, Boriss. It is a pleasure and honor to be present in this conference. I would start by congratulating Ukrainian colleagues for organizing this very important event. Well, to start with, I represent Georgia. So for me, it's talking about anti-Israelism or anti-Semitism, it's in some sense difficult because Georgia is probably one of those countries, and Georgians are among those nations where the last thing that you can find is anti-Semitism. We have a history of 26 centuries, actually, of peaceful coexistence of Georgians and Jews. The first evidences of this very friendly coexistence have been found in 6th century. Actually, the first evidences are coming from the 6th century before Christ. So in our nation, it is something which is very difficult to find. But on an international level, in different areas, in different parts of the world, well, obviously the anti-Semitism is something that needs and deserves proper attention. And I think that parliamentarians, politicians have a very significant role that we can play, both on a national level and on inter-parliamentary levels. Well, first of all, Boriss, you asked the question, it's a topic that we have debated, also discussed during these 2 days. What is exactly the anti-Semitism, how that can be defined? And these definitions, in my opinion, should be made by parliaments, and how politicians communicate with their constituency, how politicians speak about what is the message that they spend on this topic is very, very important, because we all understand that awareness raising, education is the key for preventing anti-Semitism on a local level, on a national level, as well as on international level. And politicians, as people who are talking heads, who communicate, who have all tools and means for communication with their constituencies, have a significant role to play. Obviously, the parliaments have also very good tools, which is legislation actually, for preventing any forms of discrimination, any means for discrimination. For example, In our case, the anti-discrimination legislation is quite strong, is quite good. I don't think that there have been cases of identified cases of discrimination on anti-Semitic grounds, but the legislation is in place. And no matter whether there is a state agency, whether there is a private agency, or the individual who might discriminate person, they will be facing, this person or this entity will be facing the charges according to the law. As well as parliamentarians and parliaments have an obligation and have opportunities also to provide, to create the legislation which are targeting the hate crimes. And these pieces of legislation, the effective implementation of these laws can serve as good tools and good mechanisms for preventing any expressions or any expressions actually of anti-Israelism or anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism. As for the inter-parliamentary levels, I think that especially on the Council of Europe, because I feel more comfortable speaking about the Council of Europe rather than other international parliamentary and inter-parliamentary formats. I think that Council of Europe has very effective and very good tools to monitor the countries, to make countries follow the different obligations. And these monitoring mechanisms, I think that in case the Council of Europe desires, this anti-Semitism is something that should deserve the attention from all member states, then Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly has the tools actually to make states pay attention to this problem and implement some of the reforms, or just promote some of the programs, some of the educational exercises which will help us to explain to citizens, to people all around Europe, why this is a problem, explain better than we do at this stage, and put additional effort into preventing emerging of increased issue that we are facing at this stage. So I think that the international mechanisms are there. I think that all of us can contribute to becoming this topic better debated and better discussed than it is right now, because I think that sometimes the problem is overlooked, and all of us can play, all the parliamentarians in this international parliamentary platforms have opportunities and also an obligation to make these debates even more active, and therefore use the tools that interparliamentary platforms have for facing this problem. So this is very briefly from my side, and I would be happy to answer your additional questions, Boriss. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tamar. Mr. Habib, would you like to make your contribution?
Hello, everybody. If you don't mind, my English is not perfect, so maybe I'm going to do it in French, but if people have translation, if no, I can try to do it in English, but it's not perfect with my terrific accent.
It's up to you. You are in a democratic country, so you have choice.
I will do it en français. Je suis très heureux aujourd'hui d'être...
I'm very pleased to be here in Kyiv. I congratulate the organizers for this wonderful session. Naturally, Ukraine has painful things in the past in terms of anti-Semitism. We're talking about that of huge number of Jews. At the same time, Ukraine has seen the birth of Jabotinsky, great writer, Shalom Aleichem. So I'm very pleased to be here. I'm here for the first time. I welcome everybody. Let's start from our topic. In 2018, in my country, anti-Semitism has been existing. One person was stopped, not because he was a Jew. Over several years, we've had 12 people who died starting from Toulouse, 3 Jewish kids together with their father were killed because they were Jews. Today, France is facing a rise of anti-Semitism by 70%, whereas Jews account for less than 1% of French population, and anti-Semitic acts account for 50% of overall racist acts. So it's something that worries me a lot. I am worried a lot only about Jews. I'm worried about France, about my country, because this nation today, the new face of France is hatred towards Israel and anti-Zionism. Naturally, there is traditional right-wing anti-Semitism, something like was in Pittsburgh and Miami, but less in Europe, and in particular in France. Yet now in Eastern Europe, it's about hatred towards Israel. It's mainly political act. They speak no more about anti-Semitism. I repeat, I'm not worried about Jews. I'm worried about France. There's something I say at the National Assembly. Represent French living abroad, 350 people, Malta, Cyprus, Turkey, and Israel. I am a Jew, member of National Assembly. 7 cardinals in Vatican also voted myself. At the same time, I'm saying that I'm very concerned with the situation in France. There were cases, you must remember, there were attempts at the stadium in France and in Normandy. There have been attempts on the clergy with shouting Allah Akbar. It's not about anti-Semitism, but later on it will be reduced to anti-Semitism. I'm so much concerned about Jews, because today there's evidence that Jews exist. I'm speaking about the state of Israel. Israel exists due to shore, but this is a lie. Every day people pray of returning to Zion. 3 years ago, a friend of mine, Prime Minister Netanyahu, been for 30 years together. We grew up together as kids, and a couple of days ago, my Israeli colleagues have gone, but tomorrow there will be Red Tape Day, restaurants will close, and Netanyahu was taken together with me. We watched the movie. There was an American pilot. He was 90, and he told his story. He said that he had 10 occasions to drop bombs on Svensson during the war, and he said that 10,000 Jews died of in Auschwitz, and he was an American pilot, and he told how he couldn't drop bombs on rails leading to the Auschwitz because he hadn't had the consent, and he said it wouldn't happen today. Today, the Tzahal have liberated the France aircraft captured by and there were hostages. It had Jews, non-Jews, but it was an France aircraft. And today, the evidence of the security of Jews is the State of Israel, the French National Assembly. I am very often called Mr. Israel at the National Assembly because I'm Jew. I love Israel. I love friends like I love my mom and dad, because you can't prefer your mom or your dad. I love both France and Israel, and the only guarantee now for the people of Israel is the existence of the State of Israel. That's why they are trying to diabolize Israel, to falsify history, and Europe can't recognize Jerusalem as the Israeli capital, and that's why every and each of us as Jews from various countries, for us it's very important to make sure that we highlight the truth. Unfortunately, I won't go on any further. I'll pass the microphone to the others. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Большое спасибо за то, что
Coming from here, from Chernovtsi, from Kyiv, I feel absolutely at home, being from Vilnius, from the former Jerusalem of the North. Well, pre-war time, the biggest minority in Lithuania were Jewish. I'm from Kaunas, former capital, and can you imagine 7 daily newspapers in Yiddish with chapters from Yiddish newspapers in Beijing, in New York, this European Yiddish-speaking society with Thomas Mann, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Franz Kafka in Yiddish. This classical European society destroyed. And when we started our war for independence against Soviet communist rule in Lithuania, we started from the moment of recognizing the Jewish presence in Lithuania and Lithuanian collaboration with Nazis. Self-critical point for every country in the European Union and applicant, associated member Ukraine, is of extremely importance. Why it's so important to say about collaboration with Nazis and Jewish heritage, and then to go to the chapter of Israel? Well, those 3 chapters, heritage, Jewish heritage, how we were murdered. In Lithuania, 94% of Jewish people were murdered. Can you imagine? It's one of the highest percentage in Europe. And my mother spent 4 years in Kovna ghetto and Nazi concentration camp Stuttgart, and she's still smiling. She's 97-year-old, and she has just told me on telephone, give best regards to Ukrainian Jews. We remember their Yiddish big world. So from our point of view, concentrating on Boriss Cilevics title, which just announced by Boriss, this should clearly have the components done by West European countries like France and Germany after denazification, after the talks about Vichy regime, when Monsieur Mitterrand finally recognized in the 90s, Germans started denazification, the German under American pressure, but the authentic denazification came, I think, Boriss together with only from 68, from 70s, when we just have the internal discussion in Germany. And now Germany, like a key element in the European Union, stopped actually their educational move to the east. I would like here to invite our German friends who were so active after Second World War, clearing German society, now under leadership of European Union, should be responsibility of Germany should continue to be for new members of European Union and associated members too. Madam Merkel should be telling not only for German society, but for the Poles, Czechs, Hungarians, Lithuanians, Latvians about their duties. And we are, based on our dialogue with Berlin friends, we need European Union leadership not only against populism inside of European Union, but making homeworks about the Holocaust to continuation of homeworks. From my point of view, for example, American Jewish contribution for independence of the Baltic states was crucial. For our NATO membership was crucial. Andy Baker, Davis Harris, American Jewish Committee, Stuart Eisenstadt, clear support for in 89, in the 90s, 91, it was so crucial that now we can remember, after 30 years of independence, the Jewish people were supporting independence and our war for liberalization and freedom fighting in the 90s. So being from the 90s, from our democratic revolution, now supporting Ukraine on the path of their westernization, we like to have moral leadership. Boriss, what we have now, the program America First, Lithuania First, Germany First, even Ukraine First, is bad. We should have our solidarity first, our democratic solidarity first, our Jewish solidarity first. And Jewish solidarity first means for us that the attacks against Israel should be accepted not like only terror attacks, but against attacks against humanity. Well, Israel is the place who defends democracy, and those 700 rockets during the last days against Israel means not terror attack, but attack against statehood of Jewish people and democracy of Jewish people. So we should make other qualification of those continuing terror attacks, and I would like to describe a very small example in 2 words what happened in usual meeting. Just Boriss mentioned about United Nations, that is bad platform to talk. The organizations like Parliamentary Assembly, Council of Europe, like NATO Parliamentary Assembly, OSCE, much better, like, for example, IPU. Well, Mr. Habib tried to just tell to us about situation in France. I will describe you the meeting among 200 countries, members of IPU, inside of IPU. After Swedish member of parliament announced a resolution about women's rights against harassment of women, and was supported by United States, Canada, Australia, Israel, first of all, and Ukraine, of course, Georgia. The declaration about women's rights against harassments, actually harassments in parliament, that was a very anecdotic resolution. Well, anecdotic, well, it for us was self-understandable. It was condemned by 185 countries, mostly Muslim countries. Can you imagine about such simple thing like, not about Israel, not defending Israel, about women's rights in the APU organization, International Parliamentary Union. A few months ago, simple 101st resolution about women's rights was put down by the other kind of civilization, other kind of culture against, that means our friends from Africa, they were voted against, and we were only Western countries voting in favor of human rights. I'm not talking about resolutions about Israel. It's blocked item and supported only by most European Union, American and Australian, New Zealand, Western, and from time to time Japan. So even India is not on our side in most of voting. So from my point of view, talking about Israel, we should openly changed our slogan, our parliamentary slogan, and talk about the attacks against humanity, not only terror attacks, but attacks against democracy. That is, well, we are based on the platform of democracy, and we would like to have Ukraine in the family of Western democratic countries, and your last election proved that you are a Western democratic country. Thank you.
Thank you, Emanuelis, for this very important contribution. Indeed, it's paradoxical that Israel is widely recognized that Israel is the only genuine democracy in the region, and exactly the only democratic state is most actively attacked by other states which consider themselves democracies. So you're absolutely right that this dimension should be stressed. Congressman Trent, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. It's a sweet honor for me to be here with all of you. I've had a wonderful time here in Ukraine, and I want to thank Majed El-Shafi and Joe Steinberg for helping me find my way around Ukraine. I would be wandering the streets of Kyiv in a daze without them, so I'm very grateful for their help and for their presence here. I think it's especially appropriate that this conference is held here in Kyiv in Ukraine because of the clear reputation and the way that the Ukraine across the years has been the home of so many of the Jewish people, and for the way that you have rejected anti-Semitism and have been an example to the world. You know, I had a kind of a special feeling toward Ukraine for a long time, but I suppose when the time came when the Budapest Agreement should have been honored by America and Russia, it was Russia that broke it so significantly, and America really wasn't there for you, and I've always been sorry about that. I want to be very open about that. I think that the Ukrainian people are noble people and hold a special place of heroic significance in my own heart. When we talk about the challenge of dealing with anti-Semitism, I think, you know, that it's very, very important that we realize that we have to defeat this on an ideological level. We have to somehow make anti-Semitism not only something that is rejected by society, but one that is unthinkable in the human heart. And I'm convinced that one of the surest ways to do that is to simply tell the story of Israel, of the people of Israel, and help the world understand who these children of Abraham really are. I know it's impossible for anyone to articulate the impact that Israel has had on human society and the world geopolitics and just almost everything that we do. I suppose it would be impossible for me as a Christian to point out how Israel has meant so much to the Christian world. I mean, so much of the bases of so much of our history, Israel has been responsible for. And if you consider just the impact that this little nation has had on all of human society, it's profound. I mean, America certainly has to thank Israel in that Israel was, some of the Jewish members of the society at the time that the revolution occurred probably made the difference between America becoming a free nation or not becoming a nation. And in terms of sustaining America as a nation, it's important to keep in mind that, you know, a little short guy named Albert Einstein, some of you may have read about him, he came to America because he knew it was a safe place for a Jewish person to come. And he was able to articulate the capability of nuclear fission that could be weaponized in a way that the world had never seen before. And he gave that weapon to America before Otto Hahn of Germany could have given it to Adolf Hitler. And what a dark world it might have been apart from that reality. So I would suggest to you that Israel has made profound contribution to humanity. If one considers the technology and the medical advances that they've brought, they are the smartest people in the world. And it's important that the world understands that. They understand that it's not just what we do for Israel, it's what Israel has done for America, for Ukraine, for the world. And yet, in spite of that, Israel has been a nation that throughout history has been abandoned and betrayed and tortured and desecrated. It's a heartbreaker if you really consider how the history of these people has shown that they have maintained their courage in every situation. I suppose if any people on earth ever had the right to just simply capitulate to suffering, it would have been the Jewish people during the Holocaust. If you consider the weight of unendurable heartbreak and torture and oppression that they dealt with, who could have blamed Israel if they'd simply given up in those moments? And yet, instead of doing that, in their hour of darkest adversity, when this horror was finally over, when this nightmare finally ended, they didn't give up. They chose to dry their eyes and to stand up and to look up again and begin to build again. And they built a family, and they built a community, and they built a nation. And today Israel is the linchpin of peace and security for the entire human family. It is profound if one really considers it that way. And I think sometimes that the best way to fend off a lie, to reject fallacy, is to simply tell the truth. You know, Augustine once said, "The truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it loose and it will defend itself." And I'm so deeply convinced that one of the ways that we failed Israel is by simply not helping the world understand who these people are, what a gift of God the nation of Israel has been to the entire world. And at that moment, it occurs to me that anti-Semitism will not only become rejected by society, but it will become unthinkable in the human heart. And it's important that all of us stand in a unified position to defend Israel, because, you know, unity doesn't come from just getting together like this and saying, well, we're all going to be unified. You can't sustain unity without certain foundational principles. And I am convinced that the thing that will sustain us in protecting Israel and protecting the world against the ravages and evil of anti-Semitism is to simply tell the truth about who these people are and to reject the insidious attacks against them that have happened throughout the world. You know, if you really consider the forces of good and evil in the world, one shouldn't probably be surprised that the people that have added so much to this human race are the ones that are under attack so often. And I believe that it's important that we stand there and do what we can while we can. Yeats said that the center cannot hold in this world, because the best lack all conviction and the worst are full of a passionate intensity. And it is important that the people who care are as impassioned as those who would somehow maliciously and malevolently tear down this noble people called Israel. And with that, sir, I'm going to return the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Franks. I can't agree more that this is not a matter of policies, but just a matter of basic values when we're speaking about anti-Semitism. So, friends, we have exactly 15 minutes for questions and answers. I assume that we have microphone in the room, yeah. So Andrei was the first, I guess. Yeah.
My question is to the moderator. You come from the country which in our imagination is closely associated with Lithuania. How different and how similar the situation is in your country? We heard from Mr. Zingeris. Now let's hear a bit from you.
You're absolutely right. The problems are quite similar in Lithuania and Latvia. The trends are the same. And of course, for Lithuania and Latvia, some particularly painful issues are related to anti-Semitism. It's namely Holocaust and events in Lithuania and Latvia during the World War II. So we know that Vilnius was called Eastern Jerusalem because of very big and powerful and influential Jewish community which was completely destroyed. The same was in Latvia, and of course, Nazis actually occupied the Baltic states very soon. And this is why in my family over 70 people were killed and 2 survived. And this is a typical statistics for the Baltic Jewry. And each of us can tell such stories. And of course, and it's not a secret that many local people, not only Latvians and Lithuanians, but also minorities, also Russians and Poles and so on, were involved in Holocaust, it's not a secret. And sometimes it's really very painful to admit. And again, some false accusations actually moved against Jews, allegedly about very active participation of Jews in occupation of the Baltic states in 1940. It's quite obvious the Jewish people did not have choice. While for Latvians and Lithuanians it was a very tough decision. It was like a civil war. And quite often it was when one brother was fighting in the Latvian SS Legion and another brother was fighting in Soviet army in this Latvian rifleman division. But for Jews, there was no choice at all. And of course, this is simply a lie. It was not the case that exactly Jews perpetrated deportations and mass executions of Latvian people in 1940. It's proved by historians, but still this myth and negative stereotypes still widespread as always, anti-Jewish stereotypes. So this is really a painful issue, to accept the past. And with this regard, I would say that policies, official policies of political class, of the governments and presidents, I fully endorse. I always say my party is in opposition, but probably relations with Israel and the attitudes towards anti-Semitism is the only issue where I fully agree with our foreign minister. This is what I always say to our foreign minister. But unfortunately, in the society at large, as well as among political parties, there are some very hostile attitudes. Xenophobic populist parties are on the rise in the entire Europe. And in the Baltic states, these attitudes toward Holocaust and issues related to anti-Semitism are particularly manifested during this process. This is a very complicated story, so I stop here. So I guess Mr. Nyman was the next, and then Mr. Giletsky.
Большое спасибо за ваше выступление.
Thank you very much for your talks. If you don't mind, I want to ask about Kyiv, Ukraine. Very short question. Here in Kyiv, there was a Kotovsky library, which was later renamed into Olena Pchilka library. Olena Pchilka was mother of a great Ukrainian poet, Lesa Ukraina, but you don't choose your parents. She was a prominent anti-Semitic. Do you think it's manifestation of anti-Semitism or not?
Did you hear the translation? The question is that big library was renamed after the name of a person who is known by because of anti-Semitic views. So is it acceptable or not in your view? Please.
I'm sorry. Извините,
I'm sorry, I'm not an expert in Ukrainian situation or local political ethics, but I must say, speaking about the Second World War, I think we should avoid naming streets with persons having to do with either murder or cooperation or collaboration with German authorities. It's a homework in civilization, and I think Ukraine also realized that this has to do with applying to the European Union. We fight this as we can. This could be called a glorification of Nazi at times. We are having debates. There's one debate on a general who signed the act of Shaulai Jews deportation into ghetto, although he didn't sign the act on murder, and there is a sign, there is a plate, sometimes they broke it, sometimes they don't, and we try to express our opinion on what who is considered heroes. So the question is, who are heroes from the past? And I want to add to what Boriss said. That in the Baltic states there is absolute consensus in relation to Israel. Everybody gives as the example of Israel as a small state. The smaller state should look up to, technical level, technological level, solidarity, etc., etc. But in terms of the past, we still have big questions. I think this development in your country has just started, and the questions are just...
The topic of this panel is preventing anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism. My question is this the same? We in the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe can witness that there is probably no anti-Semitism, but on the other hand, I think Mr. Cilevics and Ms. Chugoshvili and Emanuelis, we know that each time we have a resolution about Israel and Palestine, almost all of them are one-sided. And the last one, moving the embassy, U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, I think just me and Mr. Cilevics were speaking in favor of this. The others were on the other side. So by the way, Congressman, greetings to your president for this decision. But again, my question, is this the same or not? Because if it is the same, then we need to unmask and say that anti-Israelism is a form of anti-Semitism. So I'd like to hear your answers. I mean, anybody who would like to answer this question, please.
So colleagues, yeah, Habib, please.
Yes, I will try to answer in English and not in French, maybe it's more. Everybody has the right to criticize the government of the State of Israel, as we can criticize any government. The problem today is to hide the anti-Semitism, which is not politically correct, by anti-Zionism. That is the point. You know, see what happened in the last day in Gaza Strip. You don't think that Israel can destroy in one day and to shave Gaza Strip in few hours? And they try to do chirurgical act to try to kill one by one terrorists. Sometimes you have, for sure, some civil wounded, but the problem in Europe is today, I mentioned you, when they kill in Toulouse, when they kill in Hypercacher, they remind Palestine problem, and they kill Jew, and after they kill French. And mostly today, the new anti-Semitism I mentioned you come from, see what happened in France, for example, today, with the Gilets jaunes. Don't know how,
yellow jackets.
Yellow, how do you call it? Gillette. Yeah. What they say, they began from normal thing. Today, it's Jew, Rothschild, Macron has worked in Rothschild Bank, the press belongs to the Jew, Israel, you know, every way is mixed. So your question is good. It's much more easy today. Boycott, what is boycott? What you find one place in the world, you have around the world 200 conflict territory, 200. But one is pointed all the time in the Palestine and Israel conflict. Why? You know, I am member of Parliament of Turkey. You know that it's the north of Cyprus. You have a conflict. You know, in Ukraine, Russia, you have some conflict. We have 200 conflicts in the world. The only one which is focused is on this so small country, Israel, but not, they don't mind. That is the point. That is the reason of all the problems all over the world. So, in my opinion, you can criticize Israel, but the new anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism.
Just thank you. I fully agree. I guess this was the point. Yeah, Congressman Trent, yeah, please.
Yeah, first of all, I agree with my colleague. You know, there are ways to criticize Israel and some of their policies without being anti-Semitic. But so oftentimes, it's been my observation over the years that some of the institutions that ostensibly are even-handed, when it comes to Israel, they are not. The United Nations, I think Israel oftentimes calls them United Nothing, which is, in my judgment, rather charitable at times, because of the way that they condemn Israel time and time again, completely disproportionate to anything else that more the real discrimination and tragedies that occur across the world they seem blind to oftentimes. And Israel always seems to be judged by a double standard. And I see that as a basic anti-Semitism in itself. If the criticism is for the policies, that's one thing. But if there is a clear double standard that seems to be directed at the Jewish people, Israel is a Jewish state. You cannot separate that fact. So I just think it's very important that we're very, very, very vigilant. And I know there's a lot of momentum that is hard to overcome, and it's difficult. So I might just, probably will be my final thought to the conference, just suggest to you that as difficult as it is, we have to be unified and committed. I saw a movie here recently that depicted in 1588 an event where Queen Elizabeth rode down to her army, who was facing this massive armada from King Philip and from Spain, and it looked hopeless. It looked like there was no way they could possibly win. And she gave a speech that day that changed the history of the world. She said, "My loving people, you know, we see the sails of the enemy now approaching. We hear the guns across the water. Soon now we will meet them face to face. I am come here to live or die this day amongst you all. While we stand together, no enemy shall pass, no invader shall pass. Let them come with the armies of hell, they will not pass. And when this day of battle is ended, we meet again, in heaven or on the field of victory." And I hope that all of us in this room, including Georgi Levinsky over there, good man, I hope all of us in this room will come together as often as we need to, year by year, and be committed to stamping out this evil of anti-Semitism in the world. And if we do that, if we continue to meet, we'll either meet in heaven or on the field of victory. God bless you all. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe that there are, these are very right words to conclude this session. Our time is over. And I would like in the end to express once again my gratitude to the organizers. Indeed, we need unity, we need coordination, we need synergy, and it was a great opportunity to meet old friends and to meet you people, like-minded people. Only together we can win this scourge of anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism. I thank you to all the panelists, and keep working. Thank you.